My boss said I should cover the team retreat because I'm single with no real responsibilities. I quietly froze the company card. By morning, their luxury getaway was canceled. And that was just my first move. They told me I should pay for the company retreat because I was better off. That was the exact phrase my supervisor used, right after chuckling about how lucky I was to be single. No kids, no mortgage, no medical expenses like Mel. No second car payment like Tori. And Greg? He just raised his eyebrows and said, "Come on, Rylan. It's good karma." Right. Karma. My name is Rylan Henderson. I'm 35 years old and work as a senior logistics analyst in Seattle. And up until that moment, I thought I was part of a team. I thought I was respected. But as I sat there in the conference room, with everyone nodding along, it became painfully clear I wasn't a team member. I was a wallet with legs. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just nodded and said, "Sure." Then I left the meeting, walked back to my desk, and opened the finance app linked to our corporate retreat card. Quietly, without a word to anyone, I froze it. They didn't find out until the next morning. Apparently, the hotel called the office, said the card wouldn't process the final balance for the coastal lodge we were booked at. Spa services, seafood platters, premium room upgrades, declined. The front desk wouldn't release the block of suites without payment. Greg sent a group chat message full of question marks. Mel texted, in 3 separate bubbles. Nobody addressed me directly, and I didn't respond. I just sat in my apartment that morning, drinking coffee, watching the panic spiral. By noon, the retreat was postponed due to logistical error. By 5, we were all still expected to show up for the mandatory annual strategy weekend at the founder's private estate. 7 hours east, up in the Cascade Mountains. It was the kind of place they talked about with reverence. Cabin was the word they used, but this wasn't some rustic getaway. It was a sprawling estate built in the early 90s that had once appeared in a niche architectural magazine and hadn't aged well. A huge property that hadn't seen any love in decades. I drove up Friday evening, the winding roads lined with pine and patchy ice. No music. No podcasts. Just silence. The higher I climbed, the more the cell service dropped, until it was just me and the sound of tires on gravel. When I finally pulled up to the estate, my first thought was, it looks cold. Not cold in the weather sense, though it was freezing out, but cold in the way neglected houses feel. Dead flowers in the window boxes. A doorbell that didn't ring. Gutters full of rotting pine needles. And behind all that, warm light and laughter spilled out through the front windows. Inside was warmth. Outside was me. I stood there for a second, just looking at it. This mansion in the woods, once so majestic, now quietly decaying. And something about it mirrored exactly how I felt inside. Used to be proud. Used to feel part of something. Now? Just another structure holding up a crumbling roof, waiting for someone to finally notice what it cost to keep it standing. I stepped inside, nodded at no one in particular, and walked toward the smell of expensive whiskey and catered hors d'oeuvres. Let the show begin. The second I walked in, the noise dipped just a little, just long enough to notice. Then Greg saw me and clapped his hands. "Look who decided to show up," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Laughter followed. That performative kind. The kind that sounds like people trying to prove they're not uncomfortable. Mel raised her glass. "We thought you froze to death somewhere between Leavenworth and here," she joked. "Did your Audi not like the incline?" More laughter. I smiled. Or something close to it. Had to stop and let karma catch up. Greg smirked like he understood some joke I hadn't told yet. "Well, good to have our CFO back. You know, Chief Fun Officer." More glasses clinked. More noise. I drifted toward the drinks table, poured myself a glass of something expensive, and pretended not to notice that I was the only one without a name card at the long dining table. Inside, everything was trying to pass for intimate. Twinkle lights strung from reclaimed beams, board games arranged carefully by the fire, blankets draped in that catalog-perfect way. But it felt fake, like a stage play version of friendship. There was a table by the fireplace covered in small boxes. Wrapping paper, company ribbons, little tags in Greg's handwriting. "Gifts from the boss," someone said behind me. Early appreciation swag. One by one, people started opening theirs. Mel got a black membership box for some luxury wine club. Tori unwrapped a sleek gadget that looked like a custom smartwatch. Even Lenny, who'd been with the company for less than a year, grinned as he pulled out a monogrammed travel kit. They were passing them around, laughing, sipping whiskey, comparing who got what. Finally, Greg turned to me. "Almost forgot," he said, tossing me a box from across the room. It was small, light, no tag. Just a plain matte box with a foil company logo stamped on top. I opened it. Inside was a generic, navy blue pin with our company's name etched into the side. Not even engraved. Laser stamped. Not even boxed properly. Just rattling around in the base like they'd tossed it in last minute. I held it up and nodded once. "Wow, truly the spirit of giving." Greg grinned. "Hey, I thought it fit the budget you approved." Then he winked. Actually winked. It took everything I had not to say something in that moment, but I didn't. Instead, I stood there while they raised their glasses. Greg said something about tight teams, big ideas, and loyalty. Everyone repeated the word like a toast. Loyalty, they echoed, sipping their drinks like they'd earned the right to say it. I drank, too. Quietly. I let the burn of the whiskey settle deep in my chest, covering the bitter taste that came with realizing what I truly was to them. Not a friend. Not a teammate. Just the guy who kept saying yes until I didn't. I slipped outside after dinner under the pretense of needing air. The night was sharp and cold, the kind that hits the inside of your lungs like ice. I walked past the empty fire pit and stood near the edge of the dark tree line, where the reception blinked in and out. Just enough signal to make a call. I pulled out my phone and dialed the compliance hotline. The number was buried in a folder I kept bookmarked, one of those things you never expect to use, but keep anyway. The line rang twice before a calm voice answered. This is corporate compliance reporting. What's the nature of your concern? I cleared my throat. I'm calling to report unauthorized use of company funds, I said, keeping my voice low. The silence on the other end wasn't surprised. Just ready. Can you specify the nature of the transactions? I gave them everything. The lodge booking under my name. The massage packages. The upgraded catering. The gift boxes. Spa credits. All of it. Item by item, I listed the purchases made over the past 2 weeks on a card that had been assigned to me but was supposed to be locked down for Q2. The agent didn't interrupt. Just typed. Was your authorization used? Technically, yes, I said, but not with my permission. I was pressured into allowing it, then revoked it. The card was frozen before the charges cleared. They tried to push them through anyway. Do you have documentation? I do, I said, already opening my expense app screenshots, card status history, emails. I can forward everything right now. Please do. I hit send. The woman on the line waited for the files to come through. Then, thank you. Based on the detail, an internal audit will be initiated. You'll receive confirmation shortly. I exhaled, watching the fog of my breath curl in the air. Will the charges be reversed? If deemed unauthorized, she said. And based on what I'm seeing, they likely will be. I thanked her and ended the call. For the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't expected: power. Not over anyone, just over myself. I'd always believed the high road meant silence, endurance, being the bigger person. But standing out there in the cold, I realized maybe it just meant knowing when to stop letting people rob you with a smile on their face. I walked back inside, past the laughter, past the flickering fireplace, past the shelf of overpriced bourbon and smug toasts. Nobody even noticed I was gone. Seattle welcomed me back with its usual gray drizzle and silence. My apartment was just the way I'd left it, minimal, clean, and quiet. No roommate, no partner, no trace of anyone but me. Some people called it sterile. I called it peace. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off my boots, and walked straight to the small desk in the corner of my living room. The lamp clicked on with a warm glow. On the desk was a folder labeled Team Support, thin manila, stuff thick. I had started it 3 years ago, half out of habit, half out of instinct. At first, it was just little things: Venmo requests for group lunches, receipts I fronted for, office culture, initiatives no one else reimbursed, shared Uber rides from happy hours I ended up covering. But then it grew. One by one, I had saved them all. PDFs of invoices I paid, just until we get budget approval, screenshots of text messages that started with, "Hey, quick favor," and ended with me footing another unexpected cost. Emails thanking me on behalf of the team. Credit card summaries. Subscriptions I covered for work tools no one asked to split. I pulled out my calculator app, tapped in each amount, each note, each name. 800 for a group offsite lunch last summer. 75 here, 250 there. 1,000 to front a conference deposit that slipped past finance. By the time I reached the last page, the numbers staring back at me read $39,212.44. Almost 40 grand. Not a bonus. Not part of my salary. Just money I quietly gave up in the name of keeping the machine running. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the total. Not even angry anymore. Just clear. I opened a blank document and began typing. To Human Resources, CC, Greg H., Mel S., Tori C. Subject, Expense Disassociation and Formal Notice of Financial Disengagement. Effective immediately, I am ceasing all personal financial contributions to team-related expenses. Attached is a breakdown of costs I have personally covered over the last 8 years, totaling $39,212.44. This includes, but is not limited to, team lunches, event deposits, travel bookings, platform subscriptions, and ad hoc expenses never formally acknowledged or reimbursed. Please note, I will no longer participate in shared costs for team events or tools. I am removing myself from all shared payment platforms and internal planning threads. Any future charges under my name without express written consent will be disputed. This is not a request. This is documentation. Rylan Henderson. I attached the PDF. Hit send. Then I opened Slack and began exiting the shared channels. Hashtag team bonding, hashtag culture club, hashtag retreat planning. Each, are you sure you want to leave? Prompt popped up with a cheery icon. Yes. 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 Then came the shared Google Drives, the Dropbox folders labeled fun stuff, the recurring calendar invites I'd created but no longer cared to attend. One by one, delete, unsubscribe, remove access. It felt surgical. Clean. When I was done, I sat back, staring at the empty desktop. No more silent dues. No more being the unthanked foundation for other people's perks. It was strange, realizing how deeply I had let myself believe that being useful meant being valued. But here, in the dim light of my own making, I saw the truth. They never really saw me. Just the convenience of what I could offer. And now? They could figure it out without me. Ava lived in a house at the edge of a dead-end street in Ballard, one of those tucked-away neighborhoods that used to belong to fishermen and retirees, now slowly being swallowed by cafes with Edison bulbs and cocktail menus written in cursive. Her place didn't match the rest. It looked untouched, weathered in the right way. I parked out front, holding the folder I'd printed earlier that morning. Tucked inside were all the numbers, screenshots, and memos I'd sent to HR. And more, notes I'd started adding since the retreat. A record of silence, of pressure, of weaponized team culture. I hadn't seen Ava in over 2 years. She used to work in our finance department, senior compliance and ethics. The real kind. Sharp mind, steady voice, never played politics. She was the one person who'd actually tried to call out misuse in our expense reports and was promptly shoved out under the excuse of organizational restructuring. Most of us knew it was retaliation. No one said it. But I remembered the email she sent on her last day. If anyone ever needs to talk about anything. I kept that email. She answered the door in jeans and a flannel shirt, hair tied up, mug in hand. Same sharp eyes. Well, she said, looking me up and down, either you're here for my sourdough starter, or something snapped. I held up the folder. Little bit of both. She stepped aside. Then come in. I've got good coffee and bad news. Dealer's choice. Inside, her place smelled like ground beans and wood polish. The furniture was old but solid. A far cry from the glossy startup office we used to share. We sat at her kitchen table while I laid everything out. She didn't interrupt. Just flipped through pages, nodding, asking a question here or there. When she was done, she leaned back and let out a low whistle. They've been using you like a damn safety net. I let them, I said quietly. For years. That doesn't mean it's not abuse. Her voice was calm but certain. They created a system where saying no felt like betrayal. That's not team spirit. That's coercion with better branding. She pulled a notepad from a drawer and started writing something down. I know someone, she said. Corporate compliance lawyer. Specializes in retaliatory structures and discretionary abuse. Name's Priya Talcott. She's handled bigger fish than this. I blinked. You think this is something worth going after legally? I think, she said, looking me dead in the eye, you've got proof. And leverage. And that scares people more than lawsuits. Then she flipped to the last page of my folder and smiled, sharp and satisfied. You see this clause here? She asked, tapping a line from our employee equity trust agreement. Yeah, I didn't really know what it meant. It means if an employee receives more than 10 grand from another staff member without formal documentation, their equity distributions can be penalized, especially if it's been framed as voluntary support or team bonding. I stared at her. So if I quantify what I've covered, they get docked, she finished. Legally. Proportionally. And just like that, the fog I'd been walking through for months lifted. I hadn't just been used. I'd been underwriting their futures. And now, I had a way to even the scales. The letters were printed on heavy, off-white paper. Certified mail, return receipt requested. One for Greg. One for Mel. One for Tori. Each envelope included a breakdown of expenses by category, lodging, food, gifts, transportation, and a summary of total contributions from my personal accounts. Each totaled over $10,000. All tied to them by date, occasion, and in some cases, chat messages confirming I'd cover it this time. Every sent back by screenshots. Every transaction matched to an email thread. No wiggle room. I walked into the FedEx store like I was filing divorce papers. Which, in a way, I was. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had received 3 delivery confirmation emails. I opened a blank browser tab, logged into the internal equity system, uploaded the documents, citing Clause 17.4.b of the Employee Equity Trust. Any individual receiving over $10,000 in undocumented peer contributions may be subject to a redistribution of stock units at the discretion of compliance. I filed official equity penalty claims against all 3. The form asked for a witness or co-signatory. I entered Ava's name and attached her notarized memo of verification. She had seen the numbers. She had worked the system. She knew how to make it stick. Once I clicked submit, there was no one doing it. But I didn't hesitate. I hit the button and watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Done. Then I started the rest. I opened our team's shared calendar and deleted myself from every event, every sync, every birthday lunch. Removed my name from rotating happy hour reminders. I left the WorkFam Slack channel without fanfare. One click. Gone. I cleared out of the company's shared cloud folders where I'd stored documents for others. Transferred ownership where necessary. Deleted the rest. Then I opened the group chat. The one with Greg, Mel, and Tori. The one they used to coordinate retreats and expenses while pretending everything was democratic. Greg, can we talk about the budget for Q3 bonding stuff? Tori, let's get ahead of the summer plan this time, beach weekend. Mel, we should book early. I'm assuming Ryland's card. That one got a laugh react from Greg. I typed one message. Me, per compliance guidelines, I filed equity redistribution claims against each of you for undocumented financial contributions exceeding $10,000. All future expenses should be routed through formal channels. I've removed myself from all group accounts. Do not contact me about team cost again. Then I archived the thread. My phone buzzed within a minute. Greg, of course, but I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't interested in his version of an explanation. I wasn't interested in hearing them say, "You're blowing this out of proportion," or "It was just a misunderstanding." There were no misunderstandings. Just decades of expectation. And finally, the invoice had come due. I shut my laptop and stood at the window, looking out over the wet Seattle streets. For the first time in years, I wasn't entangled. I wasn't holding anything up. The threads were cut. The weight was theirs now. Let them figure out how to carry it. I waited until Monday morning. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted it to land during their most performative time, just as the week kicked off, when everyone still pretended to care about productivity, about company culture, about being on the same page. I opened the internal company forum, the one they use for big announcements, promotions, birthdays, peer shoutouts. It wasn't optional to read. It fed directly into the Leadership Digest email. I typed slowly, carefully. Subject, a personal and professional boundary. Over the past several years, I've participated in numerous team bonding activities and expenses under the assumption that we were all contributing equally. What began as a shared commitment evolved into an unspoken expectation that I would cover costs in the name of unity. I want to make it clear, that expectation was never mutual. I have personally funded over $39,000 in unreciprocated team expenses, from lodging and gifts to events and subscriptions. Not once was this formally acknowledged. Not once did any of the primary recipients offer repayment. I am no longer willing to subsidize a culture that confuses generosity with obligation. Effective immediately, I've withdrawn from all shared platforms, filed formal equity redistribution claims, and severed financial ties with the individuals involved. This is not retaliation. It's course correction. For those who feel discomfort reading this, ask yourself why. This is not an open invitation to debate. It's a closed chapter. Ryland Henderson. I hit post. The first response came in under 5 minutes. A quiet respect. Then another. Thank you for saying this out loud. By 10 a.m., my inbox was stacked with replies from people I hadn't spoken to in months. Some I barely knew. People from other departments. Junior analysts. Quiet engineers. I thought I was crazy for feeling the same way. They did this to me too. I always wondered why you stayed silent. HR, emailed by noon. Subject, request for discussion. Ryland, we'd like to schedule a meeting to review your post and better understand your concerns. Please let us know your availability. Best, Marissa G., Employee Relations. I replied with 3 open time slots and CC Priya Talcott, my new corporate compliance attorney. Just her name in the email was enough. HR responded 10 minutes later confirming a time and thanking me for my professionalism. But of course, it didn't stop there. By late afternoon, Greg posted something cryptic on LinkedIn. A black square background with white lettering. Real loyalty doesn't come with a receipt. Mel shared it with a heart emoji. Tori commented, exactly. Not everything needs to be a performance. A few people liked it. Not many. Then came the email, sent from Greg's side business account. Subject line, cease and desist. He tried to sound official. Claimed defamation, loss of reputation, emotional distress. Said I'd violated some unwritten code of team trust. Threatened legal action if I didn't remove my post and issue a retraction. Priya read it and rolled her eyes. Amateurs, she said. This isn't a legal threat. It's a tantrum in PDF format. I didn't respond. Didn't even forward it to HR. Instead, I blocked Greg's personal email. Then I muted Mel and Tori across every channel, Slack, text, LinkedIn. Done. That night, I went for a walk through Gasworks Park. It was cold, but clear. The skyline glittered across Lake Union, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't have to check my phone. I wasn't bracing for a request, an obligation, a crisis disguised as team bonding. I had said what needed to be said, and now the silence was mine. The equity system updated at exactly 9:17 a.m. Thursday. I had the email open before the notification banner even faded from my screen. Subject: Equity Redistribution Adjustment. Confirmation of Penalty Clause Activation. Inside was the breakdown. Gregory Hawthorne, 28% reduction. Melissa Sandlin, 21% reduction. Tori Chong, 19% reduction. Each penalty was backed by documentation, cited under Clause 17.4b of the Employee Equity Trust Agreement, the very clause Ava had flagged. The system labeled the reductions as unjustified peer compensation without documentation. Corporate speak for, they took and didn't give back. Underneath their names, a new entry had appeared. Recipient: Rylan Henderson, reallocation complete. Full vesting status maintained. Attached was a digital certificate of confirmation. I clicked it open. My stock shares hadn't just been protected, they'd grown. A redistribution bonus was included as part of the clause trigger. Not large, but symbolic. A redirection of what had been siphoned away in silence. I stared at the screen for a long moment. No emotion at first. Just relief. A kind of internal stillness, like a soundproof room after months of static. Then the messages started. Greg, are you kidding me with this? You weaponized a trust clause like some petty revenge move. Mel, this is unethical. Rylan, you're punishing people for being your friends. Tori, you really think this makes you look strong? You look like a bitter accountant with a grudge. I didn't reply. Greg again. We're going to appeal this. You can't just take stock out of people's pockets. That's theft. No, I thought. That was restitution. Greg again, 2 minutes later. You're dead to this team. Don't show your face at the next all hands. I hit block on his number. Then Mel's. Then Tori's. I didn't need their rage. I didn't need their denial. I didn't need their warped logic that cast them as victims for finally facing the math of what they'd taken. My phone buzzed one last time. A new number I didn't recognize. I answered without speaking. Rylan, the voice asked. Greg, again. Voice low now, like he was testing for weakness. I didn't respond. Listen, I don't know what Ava told you, but this wasn't supposed to be hostile. We were a team. You blindsided us. I let him finish. Then, calmly, I said, Greg, when you spend years eating off someone else's plate, you don't get to cry when they take the plate away. I hung up. That was it. No more backpedaling. No more compromises. No more, we're all in this together. Lies wrapped in forced toasts and budget approvals that somehow always landed in my lap. I hadn't just enforced a clause. I had reminded them, legally, formally, irreversibly, that I wasn't theirs to use. And now, they could stare at their reduced portfolios and wonder how loyalty had a number. Because it always did. They just didn't think I'd be the one to calculate it. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. No farewell lunch, no email blast, no awkward card with half-hearted signatures and dry chocolate cake in the break room. Just a 2-line resignation sent directly to HR, a time-stamped goodbye tucked between calendar meetings they'd already stopped inviting me to. Subject: Notice of resignation. Effective 2 weeks from today. No transition assistance required. By the time Greg, Mel, and Tori saw it in the Monday HR bulletin, I was already driving through Eastern Washington. My car was full, duffel bags, toolboxes, one framed photo of me and my brother fishing in high school. The rest I sold, gave away, or left behind. Seattle disappeared in the rearview. Missoula, Montana. That's where I landed. I'd found the job through Ava's network. Lateral title, smaller company, privately owned. No stock performance bonuses. No forced retreats or fake wellness Wednesdays. Just clean systems, smart logistics, and a manager who used the word boundaries in the interview like it was a feature, not a warning. The day I walked into my new office, no one cared where I came from. No one asked if I'd planned the next team dinner. No one assumed I'd foot the bill. They just handed me a login and said, welcome. I rented a small cabin just outside town. With siding, pellet stove, a porch that creaked when you stepped on it. You could hear birds out here. The real kind. Not city birds rummaging in dumpsters, but the kind that chirped at dawn like they'd never heard a deadline in their life. I joined a hiking group the second weekend. Nothing formal. Just 6 or 7 locals who met on Saturday mornings with mismatched water bottles and worn boots. We didn't talk about revenue goals. We didn't mention Slack. I bought a second-hand saw and started building my own furniture badly. But the first time I sat on the crooked bench I made with my own hands, it didn't matter that it wobbled a little. It was mine. Unshared, unpaid for by others, and entirely mine. A month in, I deleted my old work files. Cleared out the backup drive. Removed the shared contacts from my phone. Slack, Google Drive, shared calendars, gone. The past wasn't even a folder anymore. One morning, I hiked up into the Bitterroot Mountains alone. The trail wasn't long, but the view at the top opened up into something quiet and wide and green in a way Seattle never could be. As I stood there catching my breath, a man about my age passed by, nodding politely. "You new around here?" he asked. I smiled. "Yeah," I said, starting over. He grinned and kept walking. I stayed a while longer, letting the air fill my lungs like I hadn't in years. No group chats buzzing. No spreadsheets waiting. No unspoken debts stacked like stones on my back. Just me, out here, free, exactly where I was always meant to be.